Welcome to Blind Level Tech. This isn't just accessible tech talk. This is technology on a whole new level. We're showing you just how possible it is to live the life you want.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Blind Level Tech. I'm your host, Evan Starnes, and I'm just coming at you with a quick pre-show announcement as this week's guest and next week's guest is Gable Meade, and our focus is really talking about, well, first of all, how he got into playing video games as a child, how he adapted them, and now how the landscape of accessible gaming looks today, how things are accidentally made accessible, and how you can get into audio gaming yourself if you haven't done it before. And yeah, when we recorded a couple of weeks ago, I did what I do and got way too in the weeds on some things. And let's just say we ended up with over an hour of recording. And for this show, that's quite a lot. So I did have to condense it down into two parts. So yes, this week we're going to focus really on how Gable got into gaming and his thoughts on accessible games and what he would recommend, and even how the ideal setup if you're looking into a game console or something along those lines. Next week, though, we're going to be discussing the Mortal Kombat tournaments. I'm not going to say their name because I want to save it for the episode, but the competitive tournaments that him and some of his friends are putting on, and the fact that it's their 5-year anniversary. So stay tuned for that next week, but enjoy this episode and stay tuned for part 2. I sure hope you enjoyed that episode we did last week with Alex Russamano. And I hope that you guys have gotten to kind of explore a bit more of the new haptics technology and their Codex Braille display. It's a pretty cool little device. But that's not the focus of today's episode whatsoever, because a few months ago, I had done a solo 2-parter episode about audio gaming, quote unquote, and, how somebody who is blind or low vision, if they haven't, explored gaming in a sense, how they could get into it. And at least, I shared some of my favorite games. But the thing with those 2 episodes, well, while I have dabbled in gaming, I've kind of taken a bit of a lapse from it, sadly, although that is subject to change, especially probably after recording today's episode. But I kind of focused on a lot of, quote unquote, games that were made by blind people or intended, to be primarily played by blind people. And I really wanted to focus more so on kind of the mainstream gaming, in a sense, because it has, honestly, accessibility-wise, it has massively changed the landscape of gaming for the blind, which is pretty incredible. But I didn't really have somebody to discuss gaming with until today, because today we're joined by Gable Meade, who is a gamer, a Spider-Man guy, and also has hosts these really cool annual Mortal Kombat tournaments, which we will definitely be talking about today because they are actually coming up on their 5th anniversary. Gable, welcome to Blind Level Tech. It's great to have you here.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm really excited.
Me too. Well, can we first start out with your general background? I know you're a gamer, a Spider-Man nerd, and also a Brailleist, and you do some tech training on the side too.
Yeah. My name's Gable Meade. I live in Colorado, and I have been visually impaired my entire life. I was diagnosed with bilateral retinoblastoma when I was 8 months old, which is cancer in both of my eyes. I had my left eye removed as a baby. They treated my right eye's cancer, and then it returned when I was about 5 or 6 years old. Treated again, and I had vision until probably when I say 15 or 16 is when it really kind of petered out, and I was more or less fully blind. Um, but yeah, I am a educational brailleist for a public school district, and I work primarily with blind students, adapting their school materials into braille and other digital accessible formats. And yeah, I'm a huge nerd. I love superheroes. You mentioned Spider-Man
Oh,
already,
yeah.
and I've been a gamer pretty much my entire life. I believe so. I had vision in one of my eyes, like limited as it was for a majority of my childhood, and I played a lot of games growing up, primarily Nintendo games. Like we had a GameCube and a Wii in my house,
Nice.
and I loved like Mario games, like Super Mario Sunshine, Mario Galaxy, Mario Kart was really big with me and my siblings, and also loved all kinds of different Spider-Man games, of course. And then when I got into middle school, I started playing, you know, like Grand Theft Auto, things I shouldn't be playing when I'm
Black
13, but I
Ops,
did.
you know.
Yeah, my brother was the Black Ops kid, but
Nice.
yeah, I started branching out more. But the problem was that once my vision started to deteriorate more, it became significantly more difficult to play games I enjoyed. So when I could see, we had always like a big TV or something, and I had like my chair right up against it, and I had like a magnifier that I would use to read text or like look at finer details, and that became not as possible as I grew older and my vision deteriorated more. So by the time I was, yeah, end of middle school, start of high school, that vision was almost completely gone. And along with it was access to most of the games I grew up playing. I couldn't play Mario Sunshine or Mario Kart or, any Spider-Man game anymore, which was, when that's like a core part of who you identify as and one of your main hobbies, that's, you know, pretty distressing to go through, especially because I was like a pretty introverted kid anyway, and we lived out in the country in Iowa, and it wasn't the most practical thing for me to always like link up with friends because like I lived 10 minutes in the middle of a cornfield. So that was really tough to deal with, of like, oh well, I enjoyed this and now I I physically cannot do that thing I enjoyed anymore. But I started a shift in what I started to play around middle school, where around 2013, there was a game coming out called Injustice Gods Among Us, which is a fighting game made by the people who developed Mortal Kombat, NetherRealm Studios. But Injustice was based around like DC superheroes, so, your Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman. And I was really interested because like I've never really played fighting games before. I was really adverse to like blood and violence
Yeah.
growing up. Like I would get a bloody nose in class and pass out in front of everybody.
Mhm.
And so like Mortal Kombat wasn't really my speed. But Injustice was like rated teen, so it was like still violent and it was still a fighting game, but it wasn't as intense as your Mortal Kombats would be. And so I tried that and I really liked it. It was like my first fighting game I ever like tried to be good at, like learning the mechanics, learning like different characters, how to do the fundamentals of combos and everything. And I started playing that as my vision was like finishing deteriorating. The last like year or so I had it, any usable vision. And I noticed as I got more comfortable with how Injustice played, I started relying less on my vision. I wasn't even like looking at the TV anymore because fighting games by nature, depending on the genre, are limited in your movement. Injustice, Mortal Kombat, or Street Fighter, those are 2D fighting games where you
Mhm.
can only move left and right, away or towards your opponent. And if you pressed up, instead of moving into the background, you would jump. And if you pressed down, you would crouch. And so like that limited movement along with like NetherRealm's particular sound design really clicked with me. everything had like its own designated sound cue. Punches sounded different from kicks when they connected to like someone. And like if you had a character like Lex Luthor who was in this big power suit, he sounded different if you attacked him than if you attacked like Batman. Batman would take like a punch sound, but it's Lex Luthor sounded like you were hitting a trash can.
Nice.
And like even beyond that, like if characters share specific tools or types of abilities, they sound different per character. Like in the first Injustice, let's see like Joker and Harley Quinn and Deathstroke, they all had access to guns, but all of their guns sounded completely different. Even if they were all using pistols, they all had completely different sounds of the gun discharging.
Wow.
When they like moved and everything. Same with like swords. If characters have like in your Mortal Kombat games, you might have like 6 characters with swords, but like all of the swords have completely different sounds when they like swing through air or when they get blocked or when they get like cut through somebody. And I just love their sound design. It's always been super intricate and like unique to characters. When like some more traditional arcade fighters like Street Fighter might have like the same punch noise for everybody, and like even older like fighting games might have the punch noise when someone gets hit with a sword, you know,
Hmm.
just because that's communicating someone gets hit. And so yeah, I wasn't even like looking at the game anymore, and that enjoyment of playing Injustice, it's still one of my favorite games to this day,
For sure.
led me to get a little more braver and try Mortal Kombat. So when 2015 rolled around, Mortal Kombat X was being released, and when I opened that one up, it was my first experience like playing a game with not as much vision as I had. Like I remember when I started Injustice, I could see the characters relatively well. I could read the menus. But when I started Mortal Kombat X, it was very blurry. When I could initially make out characters standing on the stage, now I could barely do that. And the only thing I could pick up on was if there was some kind of bright flash of color, like a character using fire or something.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I could see those bursts of light, but other than that, I couldn't really see any specific movement or detailed animations. And so that was it didn't really deter me because I had already been playing Injustice for blind for so long. Um, and this I got into Mortal Kombat X, and that is probably top 3 favorite games for me of all time. I love that game. And like all my really good friends all love that game, and that's something I can go back to even though it's 10 years old.
Hmm.
Um,
For sure.
so I played that quite a bit, and I couldn't read the menus anymore, but you have to like show some ingenuity and
Kind of got to memorize the menus, sort
yeah,
of.
that's a big part of it. You have to memorize like how do I get into a practice mode? How do I get into the story mode? How do I get online? But like a big thing was the character move lists. Like I couldn't read the
Each.
details of like how do you do what move and like the intricate information of like frame data, which is like a competitive aspect of like fighting games. I couldn't read all the frame data for a move. And so I started like looking to online resources. I would find like Wikipedias or online forums that would have like the move lists like in text form, so I could read them that way. I started to do like transcription guides where I would use like sighted assistants and type out the menus, and so I could like use those for reference or give them to a new person learning the game to explore the menus and do what they can by themselves. So that was like Injustice was like my really like entry point into fighting games where I learned how they worked and how to play one.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
Mortal Kombat X is where I think I came into my own as like becoming competent at one.
Hmm.
Like going online and beating sighted people.
Yeah,
um,
for sure.
and then around 2017, Injustice 2 came out, and that one was kind of like I guess and again not a deterrent, but it was just kind of really sad, kind of a milestone where like I launched Injustice 2, and for like the first couple hours I had my brother help me through the menus because this is the first game I was playing fully blind essentially. And that's kind of a jarring
It's a
grounding
jarring
feeling.
realization for sure.
Yeah.
See that? I gotta say,
um
if I may jump in real quick, just because you really took me back a lot. But I think the whole time now I've been going through just kind of a memory lane of games. I think Super Mario Sunshine was, if we're kind of circling back, that was like the first game I ever played on the GameCube. Played it totally blind, so did terribly, but had fun with it. But it's cool to see too that things like muscle memory and sound memorization are, pretty standard techniques, for people who are blind getting into gaming. I remember the first time I ever really started doing that was with things like originally Sonic Advance 2 for the Game Boy Advance, because I was a huge Sonic the Hedgehog nerd as a kid. That was kind of my thing. And eventually, like on the original Nintendo Entertainment System, Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, because it had distinctive sounds. Like you could actually play that pretty much, auditorily. So I think, I think it's cool to see that those techniques are as effective as they might be. And then kind of as we touched on briefly, things like having to memorize how many menu items are in each menu. Does this menu have different menu music so you can tell where you are? Some of them do. Or how do you navigate around?
Especially when it comes to like menu wrapping. If you press down at the bottom of the list, you go to the top.
Yeah, and sometimes
some
it
games
makes a sound.
Don't do that. Yeah.
Some games have these annoying little like mouse style. The menu options aren't in a list; they're scattered about. Menu. Ugh. Yeah. Those. I don't know if there's really a good workaround, but how would you really describe the state of gaming for blind, low vision folks? Because consoles are pretty much all accessible now. I mean, the Switch finally got a screen reader for the Switch 2, and we've got now games like Mortal Kombat 11 that have, and I think, did they come out with 12?
They rebooted it. It's Mortal Kombat 1.
Oh yeah, and I think they kind of they upgraded their accessibility, but that was the first game I'd ever seen that had red menus, which I like the narrated menus, but we have games like that. But yeah, how would you describe audio gaming in a general sense right now?
Blind accessible gaming is in a very exciting point in its history right now. There's this excellent video I watched called A Blind Accessible History of Blind Gaming by a YouTuber named Paper Will. And he goes through different points in gaming history and how blind people have adjusted to play different games. And he had this really cool part. I can't remember the developer's name, but he's a Japanese developer. And he had found, I think he visited a blind school, and there was blind students there playing one of his games. And this was in the 1980s. So imagine the audio limitations of like your
dealing with
Sega
chips
or like
and
Super
stuff
Nintendo.
like that.
Right.
Yeah.
And so he was like, oh, these like blind children are like adapting based off of like my sound design. And so he developed a fully blind accessible game. And beyond that, you would have like your PC text adventure games, right?
Yeah. And
then of course you move on into like the iPhone or smartphone generation. You have all your audio games, your blindfold racer, pinball, whatever. But I would say in the last 5 or so years, we've seen a insane like revolution and renaissance when it comes to like mainstream AAA blind accessibility. Of course, you have your fighting games like Mortal Kombat. That's AAA,
right?
Yeah,
for sure.
But that accessibility is more universal design. It's accessible because it's a fighting game and because you can only move left and right. And there was some other games, sure, like my friends and I played Resident Evil 6. And that's just what we call accidental accessibility, where just because of how the game is designed, it just kind of works. There might be like an auto aim mechanic or this one thing where you can hold down your map, and whenever you do that, it directs you in the direction of what your objective is. And so Resident Evil 6, that came out like 2011 or something, 2012. And but no one's favorite Resident Evil except for the blind. So you had those examples, or like, people trying to make it work with games they already enjoyed. I have a friend, he goes by TJ the Blind Gamer, and he played Call of Duty after he lost his sight. And he's the first ever blind person to like prestige in like the level system, which I believe is getting to like maxing out your level and doing it again. I think that's how that works.
Mm-hmm.
And he plays fully blind just by audio Call of Duty with sighted people. And so like there's always been like the thing of like if you want it enough, essentially, you can make it work. But those very deep like pillars and barriers aren't as much of a problem because accessibility has been so much more of a focus by major developers in general, not even just for the blind, but like deaf accessibility, motor impairments. They've also had gotten a lot of love recently. And I would say like one of the earliest and probably one of the more overall crowning achievements of accessibility in gaming is The Last of Us Part 2,
Yes.
Which came out in 2020. The Last of Us Part 2 is just phenomenal. It's an amazing game. People have gripes about the story, but I think it's just perfect practically all the way through. And I had met Troy Baker, who is a voice actor for Joel, one of the main characters in the series. I had met him at a Comic-Con, and it was really exciting for me because he's also played a bunch of characters in games I enjoy, whether I played them or just watched them on YouTube. I love Troy Baker's work, and so I was really excited to meet him. And, you know, when you walk up in that line, everybody, he's given like, 40 seconds, oh, hi, thank you, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I get up to him, and he was just so nice to me. I told him that I played through Last of Us 1 and 2 because they had remade Part 1 and made it accessible with the same stuff as Part 2 had. And so I played through both of them completely by myself. And like I also play Mortal Kombat, so like he plays characters in Mortal Kombat like Aaron Black, and I just love your work. Even stuff I can't play, I love him as Joker in Batman Arkham Origins.
Mm-hmm.
And he was really nice. He gave me like 3 minutes. He talked to me like 3 minutes straight. And one of the things he touched up upon is the development cycle of Last of Us 2 and how it got accessible. Because I believe, along with being an actor, he's also like an executive producer on the game, and has like some deeper ties in like some aspects of development,
right?
Or at least has more knowledge than someone outside the company would. And he told me that the developers, Naughty Dog, they had given, I believe, 3 people 6 months to do what they could to make their accessibility features. And they had made, to that point, and probably I consider still the most accessible game of all time, not just for the blind, but for anybody. There's like over like 70 features in their accessibility suite tailored for everything. There's sound cues. There's, all of the blind stuff like navigation assistance. There's auto aim. There's a screen reader that reads every single thing in the game, from menus to resources you pick up like ammo to even like collectible artifacts. Like if you pick up someone's journal while exploring, it reads you the journal. Everything is narrated. There's audio description now in like both the games for all the cutscenes.
That's awesome.
And then even like there's, I don't know them as intimately, but there's also deaf accessibility features, deaf and hard of hearing, and then even motor impairment ones where you can completely remap the controller to play with one hand if you only have use of one hand, and left or right. It's tailored to both. And you can play through The Last of Us Part 2 and Part 1 either fully blind or fully deaf with one hand. And I think that's incredible. And
it is incredible.
Monumental like achievement they have with that game. And it's partly just because it works. The game is built around sound. It's Last of Us, if you don't know, is a post-apocalyptic setting where there's infected people, not zombies, but they're infected by a fungal virus. And part of the infection stage is that the infected become blind and they navigate through echolocation. So sound and echolocation is baked into the core of the gameplay, where you listen for the enemies and they listen for you. And so they just tied all of their accessibility sounds to that system, where if you hold down this one button for listen mode, typically if the visuals are, it dampens ambient and background sounds, but it sharpens like enemy movement.
Right.
But it's mainly a visual indicator where, like, depending on how loud someone is, their like silhouettes you can see through wall become stronger and more defined. So if someone if one of the infected like screams through a wall, like their silhouette becomes
pops
really
out
defined.
A little bit more.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And I believe that's how that works. But they just literally made it a listen mode with the blind accessibility turned on, so you can press a button and scan for your enemies, and it has different tones, whether a human or an infected, and they become louder or softer depending on how close the enemy is to you, and they rise or lower in pitch depending on if they're above or below you. And the same goes for resources. You press a button, same concept. It scans outward, and
you can kind of hear like a 3D audio view of everything around you,
and every
enemies,
time,
resources.
it's like an echolocation. When that field generates outward in like this radius from your position, every time it connects with something that you can interact with or an enemy, it pings it.
Yeah, you have like a buzz.
And then you can use the navigation to move yourself to that. And that's just like getting into like one of the million things they have in that game. Like even when you're in auto aim, it's not just you hold down the aim button, you lock onto someone, there's a tone. So like there's a medium tone if you're aiming at center mass, like the chest. There's a higher tone if you're aiming at the head, and there's a lower tone if you aim at the legs, because those have, different functions. Leg shots stun, head shots like can kill someone in one hit. And those torso shots, like they're reliable, they're a bigger area, but they can absorb more hits through the torso or something.
Right.
And so like just like there's so much good sound design. There's a dedicated audio cue for almost everything you need to do, whether it's jumping, ducking, crawling. There's a warning sound if you come to an edge, and the sound differs. If it's a thing you can safely jump off of, it's like a 12-foot drop or something, and you won't like die. It does a different sound if you're on top of a building. That's a different, deeper sound. Like if you jump off this, you will die.
You're fatal. Yeah.
And so like there's like all these different sound cues, and that came out in 2020, and The Last of Us Part 1 remake came out, I believe, 2022, and has all the same accessibility features. And I waited to play Part 2 because like I don't want to really play it but not know what happens. And I waited for too long, to the point where Part 1 came out, and I'm like, oh sweet, I can just play them in order.
That's great, actually. Well,
yeah, and it's such a cool experience, for sure.
That's amazing. And I got to be honest, you covered like quite a few different things that I was going to actually talk about. So I'm really happy, first of all, to hear that The Last of Us Part 1 got remade, because I did want to play The Last of Us, but I didn't want to start with 2 either. I kind of wanted to know the backstory first. And so the fact that 1 and 2 are now both accessible is wonderful, and I'm going to actually have to get my hands on them.
If you have access to either a PC, like through Steam, they're on there now. But the Part 1 is only on PlayStation 5.
Hey, I was going to get a PlayStation 5, so that's
I would. I would recommend the PlayStation 5 if you're getting into console gaming, because they have more exclusives that are blind accessible compared to Xbox.
Yeah.
And Xbox games are losing their exclusivity, so more and more are moving to PC and even PlayStation.
I've heard.
So PlayStation's the best, like, bang for your buck right now.
Mark my words, we're going to see, okay, this is going to infuriate some people. We're going to see Halo on the PlayStation eventually.
No, right?
Actually, I wish it was accessible. I've wanted to play Halo. And I'm really glad you'd brought up audio description, especially with cutscenes, because that's a pretty big aspect of some of these games. And especially if you want to play like the story modes in things like Mortal Kombat, you'd mentioned it's like a 3-hour movie where you play the fight scenes, and they even audio describe the fatalities, which is really cool.
Yeah. Even like, fighting games always been accessible, but even like the newer ones have, made their games more blind inclusive. Mortal Kombat 11 kind of started it with having this like pretty limited menu narrator.
Yeah.
The main limitation came from them using an actual voice actor for the voice.
Local.
Yeah, which is funny because that's Jameson Price.
Yes.
He's the guy who does like the round 1 fight. They just like don't pitch shift his voice. But like that kind of limited, because like instead of just using your like a TTS voice, you're limiting it to what a guy can record for you. And I imagine Jameson Price isn't like cheap,
No way.
So, but Mortal Kombat 1 came out in 2023, and is the most accessible fighting game out there right now. It has a TTS screen reader that interacts with everything. I'm pretty sure at this point it was like limited when it came out, but now at this point, towards the end of its life cycle, every menu is narrated. There's a big customization mode, and all those, like every piece you might unlock, those are all narrated. Not like described, but like it'll tell you the name of the costume or something. And the menus are narrated. You can read the move list and see all that really meticulous frame data and stuff. And of course, they had the audio descriptions. Mortal Kombat and other own games in particular have been really famous for their story modes. Yeah, like they're big 3-hour movies that are broken up by gameplay, which is you doing the fight. And now Mortal Kombat 1 story mode is completely narrated or audio described through. And yes, the fatalities and other cinematic moves are also described. So I could always hear like the really gory stuff, but now I get to know exactly what's going on in there. I know the woman who audio described, like wrote the audio description for that. She goes by Janissary, and she's phenomenal. And if you're like watching a live broadcast of like the Game Awards or Summer's Game Fest and you hear the woman audio describing, it's probably Janissary. And she's been awesome. And like she does things on, like she streams on Twitch and will just like practice her live audio description with the game she plays, I believe. And
that's cool.
Super cool.
I'm gonna watch her. I haven't.
Yeah, she's great.
I always thought Twitch streamers were. I enjoyed watching them, but it's cool if they audio describe stuff. I've never heard of that. So
yeah,
maybe I'll get back on Twitch again. Can we talk about? Let's say I, just wanted to get into gaming and I wanted to pick up a brand new PS5. What would you recommend as far as, some hardware and some good accessories? If, I was totally blind, that would make my experience that much more enjoyable.
Yeah. There's not much you need, unless like if you're specifically just, I want to play a game and not like I want to be a streamer or whatever. If you just want to play a video game, you don't have to have much. You need your console, and like I said, I recommend the PlayStation 5 currently, unless you're into PC gaming and you already have that stuff set up. But if you're just new to this and you want to get a console and just start, not to deal with all the PC stuff, I recommend a PlayStation 5. Whether it's the original or the Pro, it doesn't really matter. There's not a huge difference, and there's no difference in accessibility or games. But I recommend a good headset, whether you already have one. And if you don't, I recommend the PlayStation Pulse Elite or Pulse 3D Pulse. It's a first-party headset by Sony, and it's pretty affordable for a gaming headset. It's $100, nice. Which is pretty standard or pretty cheap for gaming headsets. And I have the Pulse Elites, which is only another $50, and it has like more comfortable fit, at least to me, and has some improvements over sound design, but I wouldn't say anything too significant where you need the Elites over the original. And that's pretty much it. The Pulse is Bluetooth. You plug this like USB stick into your PlayStation. When your PlayStation turns on, you turn the headset on, it automatically connects. And I don't even play with the TV on. My TV's almost always off when I'm playing. Saves my power bill.
Same.
And you do need a TV though, or some kind of monitor. Because if you don't have your PlayStation like plugged into an HDMI cord into something else, it doesn't broadcast that sound to your headset. I don't think so.
Oh, that's interesting.
But that's pretty much all you need. You can either buy games physically, but the PlayStation Store is all accessible with its native screen reader, and so you can like buy your games on there. And there's just so many different things. The most amazing part of blind gaming today is that we have the ability to choose what we want to play and what genre we want to play. Before it was like, unless you want to put in so much effort to like do partially accessible games, like my buddy with Call of Duty or Resident Evil 6, it was mainly just more like fighting games you got, right? Mm-hmm. But now you have Mortal Kombat 1 and Street Fighter 6. Those are the two most accessible and most played current fighting games for the blind. And then adventure games, you have a bunch. You have, of course, Last of Us Part 1 and Part 2. Spider-Man 2 was huge for me as a big Spider-Man fan, being able to play a Spider-Man game after 10 years of not. was huge for me. And God of War Ragnarok is another game that has its accessibility problems, but there's enough there to get playing and stuff. But there's also Diablo 4. So if you want to play an RPG, that one's really accessible too. And they're always updating to make it better. And Forza Motorsport, that's on Xbox right now.
Yeah, that one has
but that's a fully accessible. Yeah, that's a fully accessible racing game. Exclusive, but hopefully one day it moves to PlayStation or at least PC. It's on PC.
Oh, okay.
But there's choice, and it's not a lot. Like, we get disappointed every year because there's a game that comes out and you're like, oh, I really want to play that, and then you try it. Like, it's like, oh, accessibility features, screen reader. I'm like, oh, sweet, and you get it, and it's just a screen reader. There's no navigation assistance. There's no sound cues. I believe Star Wars Jedi Survivor was like that. It was like, or it was the opposite. It had navigation or something, or it happens all the time. You get a screen reader, but you don't get anything else.
Right.
You get navigation, but you don't get a screen reader.
Poorly implemented accessibility.
Yeah, and like sometimes games aren't built for accessibility. There's some games that can be really hard to make accessible.
Yeah.
And the big thing is you have to factor it in at the ground floor. You can't just make a game, it's 6 months out from release, and you're like, okay, add the blind stuff. If you're not integrating that with the core design of the code and like just the function of the game, it's not going to really like blend well. That's the problem with, I believe, God of War Ragnarok. It was more like an afterthought. It was kind of like adapting The Last of Us's like accessibility, but it's not. God of War is a hack and slash game where you just fight monsters and gods. You're not listening and creeping around corners, listening for people that are listening for you.
Yeah.
And so the same lessons don't apply. The same way, you can't just move. Coding a Mortal Kombat game is different than coding a God of War game. They don't. There's no blanket button. You press it and you add the accessibility. That's all built. You have to code that in.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's you get disappointed because there's so many cool things you would love to play and then you can't. Even if you try really hard, which is just like there's probably this really visual thing or the menus are too confusing. That mouse menu we talked about is like the death of a blind accessible game.
Yeah.
There's this game called Dead by Daylight, which is like a horror survivor game with a lot of like horror icons like Freddy Krueger, Michael Myers, and those guys. And I think that could be made accessible, but it's so hard to try because it's like a mouse menu and like you're using it like you would a free mouse on a computer, and it's just like there's nothing narrated, so it's not like you can do that. But the crazy thing is, like I said, we have choice though. It's not a huge choice. There's not a million games. There's probably at most 50, and that's generous.
Still a decent
selection. That's 50 more than we had 10 years ago. Right?
Exactly. Alrighty. Well, this has been part 1 with Gable Meade. But like I said at the beginning, please stay tuned for part 2. And if you are a Mortal Kombat fan, you are going to love this next part quite a bit. If you've got any feedback for us podcast hosts, please send it our way, feedback@aftersight.org, or you can, of course, leave a voicemail at 720-712-8856. Thank you guys so much for listening. And hey, be sure to register for the Audio Trekkers annual hike, which is coming up in September. So at the time of this episode's release, a little over a month. And you can go to aftersight.org/hike to secure your spot. And also on the programming side of things here, business-wise, we are relaunching and kind of revising what's known as our Programming Advisory Committee. So this is a committee of listeners that really kind of sit down and discuss what they'd like us to produce and put out as far as programming is concerned. So if you'd like to apply, we'd love to have you on. Go to aftersight.org/volunteer and you'll see an application, and just be sure to check the Programming Advisory Committee checkbox under that application. Thank you all so much for listening to another episode of Blind Level Tech. I'm Evan Starnes, and I will talk to you all next Wednesday.